Welcome everyone to Rewind Recap Relive, where legends and rising stars meet. I'm your host Jonah, here today bringing you big time episode 30 of the show. 30 weeks going strong, 30 episodes, and I have you guys, the viewers, along with our amazing guests to thank. Anybody who's ever made this show possible, whether it was an episode, help with a collaboration, editing, etc. Thank you. We're just ramping up. We're just getting started here on Rewind Recap Relive. So episode 30, we've got the Quintessential Stud Muffin, along with many other legendary monikers. He is an ECW original. He is Joel Gertner, and he is on with the young professor, who's a great ring announcer, manager, award-winning manager at that, among other jobs in the wrestling industry. And these two are some great personalities, and they merge really well in this episode. I can't wait for you guys to see it. And along with seeing this great combination of Joel Gertner and the young professor, next week we got coming on the Extreme Horseman, the Enforcer. That's right, C.W. Anderson himself is coming on the show with Bryce Cannon, who is a great independent talent in his own right, and you're going to see that for yourself next week, so make sure you keep your eyes open for that. Well, I'm never going to get tired of that. Thank you, Joel, but we've taken care of everything here on the channel. All you guys have to do is please go subscribe, go right down below. We are building those subscribers. I'm keeping track, as any content creator should, and I think if you guys subscribe right now, you're in the 560 group, and that's pretty cool. So make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you keep up to date on all Rewind Recap Relive news. You can follow us on Twitter at R3Jonah, on Instagram at Rewind Recap Relive. We're also on Facebook under the same name. Be sure to hit that notification bell, ding ding ding, so you don't miss a thing here on Rewind Recap Relive. Like this video, you share it around, you smash that share button, show everyone the Quintessential Stud Muffin, Joel Gertner, and the young professor, and please enjoy this one-of-a-kind interview, and I will see you soon. Our first guest is 3 years into his career within the wrestling industry and has really been a jack of all trades throughout that time, having refereed, ring announced, commentated, and managered, even winning the Atlanta Championship Wrestling 2019 Manager of the Year. Please welcome Matt Grafer, better known as the Young Professor.
Thank you very much. It's a heck of an intro, and I think I might know something about that. Maybe not as well as your other guest, but a thing or two.
And we're very happy to have you here, and I have some competition with both of you here, so I gotta live up to my host skills. And our next guest really needs no introduction. But yes.
It is I, the lyrical miracle, the sexual, intellectual, the cunning linguist, and the quintessential stud muffin. Joel, your mom wanted to see me. She would even settle for Zoom. But I decided there was nothing like giving her the full kaboom. So I went right over to your house and we did the boom, 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 all while you yourself were cooped up in your room. Gertner.
Thank you. That was amazing. That's enough entertainment for the whole episode right there. But I'm happy to have you. Happy to have you both here. This is going to be great. And I always like to start off with something basic, learning how it is you two got into the world of professional wrestling. And Professor, can you go first, please, and just tell us how your journey started?
So you're going to make me follow that. That's how we're starting this. Thanks, Joel. Appreciate the handoff. I myself grew up like many people, I guess, especially these days in the industry do. I was a fan, not a lifelong fan. It wasn't something I got into till I was around 10 or 11 years old. Actually, just by the looks of it, I started getting into it, Joel, around the time you were kind of starting out with ECW. I kind of started watching in 96 or so, 96, 97 Attitude Era. We were kind of broke, so I didn't have cable. But once I got that old USA Network, it was on. I got a chance to watch that bounce back and forth between Raw and Nitro, and then trying to find where ECW would be airing later on, usually late at night in the Northeast, because I grew up in New Jersey. So just trying to catch as much of it as I can, and fell in love. It was just something my family didn't watch a lot of sports. So it's not like we had a lot of baseball on, we had a lot of football, any of that stuff. So it was kind of open season for what I would get into, and friends of mine were into it. They told me all about it, specifically The Undertaker. That was a character that a friend of mine used to talk to me about all the time. So before I even watched, I was getting these stories of what was those secondhand, poorly told versions of the story, and kind of hooked me in, and I started watching and been with it mostly ever since. Had a couple of years in high school where I didn't follow quite so much, but loved it, fell in love, and never really thought I'd wind up doing anything with it. I did some backyard wrestling when I was like 14 years old, a long, long time ago. I think most kids kind of did at the time. It was, don't try this at home, but all of us did. And at least most of us are here to tell the stories about it. But later on, had the opportunity just 3 years ago, about a week or so ago, to literally just step in and start ring announcing. And I guess I was relatively decent at it, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
And so your first foot in the door, when was that along your interest? When was that first foot in the door?
So it's actually kind of interesting in the sense that like a few months, like 6 months before that, my wife and I were sitting and we were just kind of mapping out some things that we wanted to do in life, which is not something people do a lot, but we were like, all right, there's some things we want to work on in the house. We've got a bunch of kids, so we were like, all right, we need to kind of start figuring out how we want to spend time. Like we need to spend more time, together for dates and do this and do that.
Right.
And we also set some career goals, and I was a college professor at the time, and loved that. But people had been telling me for years, because I was a trivia host as well, and people for years had been coming up to me and go, gosh, you sound really great. Do you ever do sports? Have you ever done any announcing? And I was like, no. And eventually I said, why am I not doing that? If enough people tell you something, usually that means there's something to it. And so we literally wrote goals out, and on a piece of paper, I wrote, become a pro wrestling / sports announcer. No plan, no idea how that would work. I mean, that's a weird thing to throw into the world and the universe. And 6 months later, actually, I was just north of Daytona Beach is where I live in Florida. And there is a school there called Go Wrestle. Tony DeVito was actually there at the time. He was one of the trainers. Joel is pretty familiar with Tony, as am I. And got a chance to, they said they were looking for a ring announcer, and they put something out and said, you need to be available on Saturdays and don't suck. And I said, well, I'm available Saturdays, and I think I can manage the second part. And I showed up and didn't expect anything. I literally walked in 15 minutes before the show because no one told me when to show up. And they're like, okay, cool, we'll try you out. There's the card. There's the guys. Go, figure it out. We start in 15 minutes, and got paid after. Couldn't believe it. And said, hey, can you keep coming back? I said, I'll keep coming back. And 3 years later, I'm sitting here in a car in Miami, Florida. I record 4 shows today, and we keep coming back.
That is fantastic. Let's hand the reins over to Joel now. I'd love to hear, where did your journey in professional wrestling start?
Man, a friend of mine turned me onto it to watch it on TV. Gosh, let's call it 83, 84. Started watching, loved it. It was the greatest thing on TV. It was the only way you could hear people say really, really crazy stuff on TV back in 83, 84. There was stuff going on in wrestling, whether it's Piper's Pit or some of the stuff that heel managers were saying that was just so off the wall and so out there that it was really, really great stuff. So I just got hooked on it. And eventually, by the time I was around 16, looking at about like 1991, I found a school in the New York City area on the Lower East Side, really a gym that was set up on the lobby level of some housing projects. And they did shows there, like kind of just recitals, like for donations. And I kind of started subscribing to newsletters and just working more shows, meeting more people. And the more you immerse yourself in it, there's a snowball effect. And so it kind of started out just like that.
Right. So when did your first experience actually in the business take off?
I was probably doing those gym shows from '91 on, and doing local indie
Okay.
from '91 on until catching on with ECW in '95. So I spent between age 16 and age 20 on the indie circuit managing as Joey Jaguar. But if I couldn't get a gig managing, I'd get a gig ring announcing, or I'd get a gig refereeing, and did that for about 4 years until the ECW opportunity availed itself.
And I noticed it says that you chose wrestling over finishing up school. I think was it Cornell? Was that a hard decision for you to make?
Yeah, that's right. Was it a hard decision?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, mutually, I think there was this kind of, it was recognized both on my side and on Cornell's side that I might be the right person for Cornell. They didn't want to disqualify me, but it might have been the wrong time based on my aspirations and these other things that I was wanting to pursue. So it was kind of left as an open door, and I kind of mutually walked away from there. And was that tough to do? For the initial money that I was making as a timekeeper or ring announcer, I was probably getting, $50 a show, sometimes $40 a show.
Yeah.
Was it tough to do? It was an investment in myself, and it was a risk for sure, because nobody knew where the company would be going from 95 on, and where my spot, where I personally would be going from 95 on. It was a bit of a risk, but I've always been the kind of person by mentality that I would rather do something and then regret doing it than not do it and regret not doing it, because you can't go back and change the winds of fate, and you can't, you have to do something, and I think, and then regret doing it. That's the least of the two regrets. So that's kind of where I was.
Right. It's so cool to see it pay off and to take that investment in yourself and your passion obvious on display. Professor, for you, did you ever think about becoming a pro wrestler when you had that long interest in wrestling, or was it always, I know you said you set that goal to become a commentator, the kind of managerial, was wrestling ever in your foresight?
I mean, I think for any kids that were coming up when I did, and with wrestling being what it was at the time, I think everybody has at least thought of it. I mean, like I said, I was a backyard wrestler. My entire gimmick was based off of the Offspring song "Pretty Fly for a White Guy." I was the fly guy. I came out to that was the theme music. It was just goofy and silly. So I mean, later actually, when I was in college, and that's when for a few years I didn't watch, and then I got back into it when I was in college, because I kind of had a little bit more time on my hands for a while. And a friend of mine and I had talked about it, because we would order WrestleMania, we would watch some of the pay-per-views, and we looked up the Monster Factory, because we were in Jersey, and so that was kind of the one name that kind of popped out at the time. And I know they're still around, and Danny Cage, I follow him on Twitter and Facebook and all that, and seems like they run a pretty good show up there. But I remember we also talked about, we looked into what the tuition was, and just my brain at the time, being in college and thinking about that, making $0.0 and just kind of working for the university, working in their fitness center. I never really went beyond well, yeah, what would that cost and how far away is that? And so it just didn't even ping on my radar. And then when I eventually did express an interest in doing more in entertainment, because that was kind of starting to develop itself naturally, I thought about going to wrestling school and all that, but I knew that I'm a talker. That's kind of my lot in life. I mean, I was a college professor. I was teaching class 5 hours a day, 4 days in a row, so 20 hours per week. I had to talk to people and keep them entertained. And then I went into trivia and started doing that. And enough people had, again, kind of reinforced, hey, maybe you should do something. So rather than kind of reinvent and go, I was never the most athletic person. I trained, and I used to be in relatively good shape. But being a wrestler itself was not it. And still, it's not something that I think this side of the business is the side for me. And I just try to do the best job I can at it.
Joel, do you resonate with that at all? Because I know you were in several matches in ECW and had spots, and maybe before in that promotion you were just speaking about. So did you ever want to go into wrestling, or was managing and commentating and announcing more your thing?
Nah, exactly. I knew where my bread was buttered as well. At that school that I was telling you about, Lower East Side Wrestling Gym, which is where I met guys like Chris Canyon and Jason Knight and Danny Inferno, the Inferno Kid. I took a couple of classes. You know, I threw on a t-shirt and some gym shorts, and I went in and bounced around in the ring, and I learned the two major things. The first fundamentals that I learned, really the only things I learned until on-the-job training at ECW, was back bumps and running the ropes. And that was enough for me to know that wasn't, you know, that wasn't the side of the coin that I was meant to be on. No, I've never been super athletic, and I've always been a talker. And I'm glad I got those classes and that experience under my belt, because now when I'm working as a commentator, if I do like an pay-per-view as a commentator, I'll watch a guy like Sabu. You know, a few years ago I was doing one, and he was still in his 40s at the time, but he was in there, killing himself and doing the kind of stuff that people half his age couldn't do. And it allows me to have a real kind of personal way of letting people know, hey, you're watching this guy and you think in your wildest dreams that you could possibly do what he does. Just understand, you probably wouldn't even be able to run the ropes without getting welts on your back. You probably don't know how to properly fall and protect yourself and not come back upwinded. And having done that fundamental stuff that was so tough for me allows me to illustrate how all of this stuff that's the actual evil Knievel stuff that goes on in the ring, you know, it looks easy and flawless and impeccable because masters are doing it, but no one should ever think that it's the kind of thing that they could just roll out of bed and do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just being a fan and watching it all these years, I know I couldn't do half of that stuff, but that personal connection, that's really cool that you speak about that. Professor, so we mentioned you had that opportunity to ring announce and you nailed it. That was fantastic. So I'd love to hear, what was the preparation going into that, to hosting an event, to keeping those fans engaged? What did you do beforehand, and were there any nerves that crept up?
I had 15 minutes of prep. Literally, like, the show I think started at 7:30, and they were like, yeah, just, come to the show, we'll try you out. And I was like, okay, well, I'll show up this week. They're like, okay, cool. That was the only instruction that I got. So I knew it started. I was like, okay. So I got there. It was like 45 minutes away. I rolled up. I had a polo shirt and a jacket because I was like, it's kind of a small spot. I went to one show there a few months before, so I kind of saw the feel of it. And so I had an idea how it ran, at least from a visual standpoint. And I was like, okay, well, it doesn't seem like the kind of place where maybe you go fully suited and booted. And that was before I started dressing very differently about a year later. But just grabbed the blazer that I had picked up and polo shirt, dress pants, and I'd never met any of these guys before. But like, okay, and our locker room was like as wide as my car right now that you're looking at. And all these guys are as far as the eye can see, and I don't know anybody. And I just got this card that's written in pen and stapled to the wall. And like, hey, here's your deal. Like, here's the guys. You're going to go out there and you're going to do the whole show. And so I just was like, okay, well, I've watched enough wrestling to know I need their city, I need their weight, I need their nickname. Yeah. I'm already a good speaker. I know how to pronounce things. Like, as long as I can get that far, we'll work it out. But I'm like, I'm trying to be respectful. I'd read enough books and I followed enough stuff in the business. Like, I think you're supposed to shake everybody's hand. I think you're supposed, no one's smartened me up to any of the intricacies. And I just, I've got a jacket on. I must know something. And hello, how you doing? I need your name. Okay, great. I managed to get everybody. They bring me out, and I took over, and they, I was told, hey, you didn't suck, but you want to talk nerves? I mean, I was fine once I was out there because, especially as a trivia host, I mean, I'm entertaining live crowds every week, a couple nights a week for 2 hours, and you're a solo act, and you've got to keep that moving. So that I felt like there was a lot of transferable skills in addition to all of my classroom work. So in terms of that, an audience is an audience. You just kind of figure out what makes each one work, and that comes in time. But in terms of nailing this job and getting it right, I mean, I was way more nervous than I think I let on. and just managed to survive the night.
Oh, absolutely. That is fantastic. Joel, can you talk to me about your first foot in the door to ECW? Do you resonate with what Matt just spoke about at all? Because were you a ring announcer at first?
I was a big Howard Finkel fan, and a lot of the stuff that I did on the indies was ring announcing. And I was at an ECW show, and after the show, I knew where everybody went to kind of just hang out and blow off steam and socialize. And I was there, and Paul Heyman was there. And I said to myself, well, this is the time, and be that guy that regrets what you do, but doesn't have to regret what you don't do. So don't ask. Even if you're afraid that the answer might be no, it's no if you don't ask anyway. So go get an official no so that you at least know where you stand. So I went up to him. He was waiting for the elevator. And I said, hey, sir, big admirer of your work forever. We have a mutual friend, so-and-so. I probably kept going until I didn't need to anymore about, I used to listen to you on a radio show in New York and call in.
Yeah.
I probably went right until the point where he was ready to, blink and walk away. And I said, you guys have a show coming up in a few weeks in Middletown, New York. And I know that your regular ring announcer and timekeeping crew is based here in Philadelphia. I go to Cornell. So I'm probably, I'm not so, I would, and I just let him know. And Cornell's nowhere near Middletown, New York necessarily. It's not like it's probably even that much closer than Philly is to it. But I just said, I would love an opportunity to, and I would love to treat it as an audition and just, let you, honestly, I don't remember what I said, but I basically asked him. It was an elevator pitch without at the time in the mid 90s, me being 19, 20 years old, knowing what an elevator pitch even was. And he kind of just looked at me and he was like, you want it? And I was like, oh, well, yeah. He's like, you got it. Be there by 5. And
wow.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. And it's so amazing that worked out to see where you are now. When you went to, so that was a ring announcing gig, right? That's what he confirmed you to be there. So did you get nervous walking into a locker room like that? You'd been watching their work for so long.
It was, there were some big names on the show. It was Steve Austin's first night live with ECW. It would happen to be Bubba Ray Dudley's first night live and my first night live as well.
Wow.
I think the Steiners were there. It was big, man. Even back then in the second part of 95, I had the belief that ECW was kind of a step above the indies and had the potential to be maybe a number 3 company. That was the time where people either did or didn't believe that. And because I just knew that the company had grown leaps and bounds in the last year or two and had that idea of where they might be going. And because I knew it was the kind of thing that, I had just started my junior year at college. So I was kind of doing the weighing already of, what if this were to expand and grow so much in the next year or so that I have a decision to make. And that decision wound up coming to fruition. It was a little bit, there was some anxiety just because, I'm a perfectionist and there's anxiety every time I've got something that I do. I always kind of, I put a lot of weight on it and I put a lot into it. And it was very, but it felt natural, it felt like a dream and like I was doing a dream job, but like a good dream, not a nightmare, but when you're kind of living the dream, there's a sense of, even if you're anxious, there's a sense of kind of, there's just a kismet that
Right. We always hear about like the prolific ECW culture. It's so well known, whether the stories are good and bad. Are there any that happened to you on that first night that you remember, like being backstage with all those guys, or had that culture really taken off yet that everyone likes to speak about nowadays?
Yeah, I kind of kept to myself. Everybody
Right.
was friendly and cordial, but I kind of, I was unknown and all these people were kind of unknown to me, and it was my first night. So, No, there wasn't so much of that vibe on that night. It was just a very positive and professional experience. And I was at a stage in my career, like young professor was saying, like Matt was saying,
Yeah.
I was kind of at that stage where it was to get paid for your work in and of itself. Because I had said that I'd be willing to do it as an audition, and got paid anyway. Probably the best money that I'd been paid yet to date in my career. It was just a really, really pleasant experience. Yeah.
That's really good to hear. Professor, can you talk to us about how you've portrayed yourself, whether it be a manager or a commentator, the personality, like that switch that you flip when you go out there? What is that like?
Well, it's not too much of a transition. It's a little more. I mean, if you were to look at Joel Gertner and the young professor as two characters, they are pretty much as opposite as you can get. I mean, obviously the very adult themed limericks versus this very
Yeah.
prim and proper, very straight character of the young professor, which I'm not, that tight. And it's not that I'm tight even as a character, but the whole thing, I mean, yes, it's a persona. It's the young professor, but that name was a nickname I started using in entertainment as a trivia host because Matt is a bland name. No one remembers
Right.
it. As soon as you say you're Matt, you're automatically Mike or Mark or something. No one remembers
Yeah.
it. It's vanilla. And it's not that I'm unhappy with my name. I just kind of started figuring out, okay,
Yeah.
I tried to kind of start developing a following in trivia. And I was like, I'm already a college professor. I started teaching when I was 25. I look young. In fact, I am younger than many of my students, so I was like, let's just, young professor is the thing. And it just seemed like it worked because it's like, that could work in wrestling. And like, I've already built this brand. I'd already built a little social media following. So just continue it on. But as it's there, it was more like, and I would still kind of speak and it's very kind of prim and proper. And this way, sometimes when I'm not, it's more shocking and has more of an effect if that's something we're trying to use. And most of the time, I'm working either as a ring announcer or as a play-by-play commentator. So, I mean, my job always is to get over talent. That's the job. Like, your job is not to get yourself over, it's to get the talent over. But if you're really good at getting talent over, you get over for your position. And that's how I've been taught, and that's kind of how I try to portray it. For the manager thing, that was a real step outside the box for me because Atlanta Wrestling Entertainment put out a thing and said, you know what, we're here in Atlanta. We like, here, Georgia's got a long-standing history. There's been a lot of great managers. We like managers. We like people who can talk. So we're doing this. If you're a manager that thinks you want to get seen, come do it. If you're not a manager, but you think you can be, step out and do it. And I was at a point still very early in my career's short anyway, but it was very early still. And I realized, quickly, and Joel, you could probably speak to this, that announcer spot or even a commentator spot, there's one spot, maybe two. If you're a wrestler, like, you can show up to a show and if, this guy didn't show, we got our spot in a battle royal, like, you can get a spot. As an announcer, there's one guy, and usually whoever that is, that guy or that girl, that's their person. And so there's not a lot of ability to kind of work yourself into that position. So if you're a one-trick pony, you are really limiting yourself. And so branching into commentary helped, but I was like, I need something else too, so I can get as many places and be as versatile as possible. So let me throw my name into the hat for this manager thing.
Yeah.
And I put together some good promos that got a lot of traction, got me out in front of a lot of people. And I was beating guys that had been doing it for a while, for a lot longer than I was. And not to put myself over in that sense, but I knew what I could do, and I know what promos I like, I know what I don't. So I put it all together and tried to make something of it, and I got the spot. It was a shoot competition, and we turned it into a thing where I was actually a babyface manager and got to manage a group. And once everything kind of shut down, they have removed me as a manager, but they made me the host of their television show. And now other people, and it got me more work in Georgia. That was my first gig out of state. So I've worked in multiple states since then. So it was really a way to kind of put it out there. I had ideas of what the professor would be as a heel character, because most managers are, in terms of this kind of better than you, smarter than you, smartest guy in the room. But it's mostly just myself kind of turned up, little school, but little fun, little loose, try and get everybody over around me. and well dressed.
Yeah. we all know a bit about that here. Joel, do you have any thoughts on what Matt was saying about that one spot kind of role when you're a manager or commentator?
Oh, it's completely true. Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
a lot of the wrestlers look to us and they think, oh, this guy gets to have all of the fame and get all of the glory, and kind of, he gets to have a job because of us without all of the blood, sweat, and the tears. And a lot of that's true. But on the other end of the coin, like Matt was saying, there are 20 or 25 wrestlers on a show, and there's only one or two of a ring announcer or an announcer, commentator, so TV host. So yeah, absolutely. It's a lot tougher to get and to keep a spot when you're kind of an ancillary, everything but the wrestling kind of outside the ring and not between the ropes guy.
And for you, was it hard to make that adjustment, or what was it like really when you went from ring announcer to the beloved heel commentator and manager that we all know now?
It was an interesting progression. Everything was always a work in progress and very episodic and on an as needed basis. Paul just kept letting me know that I kept getting moved sideways. I was a ring announcer when Bob Ortiz had taken some time off. When Bob Ortiz came back, he went back to being the primary ring announcer. I became a heel ring announcer. And along the way in between then, I had been a foreign language ring announcer for the Mexican and Japanese guys that were coming in. I just kept getting moved sideways. But where I was blessed is that I kept doing well enough in all of the new positions that getting moved sideways wound up effectively getting pushed forward. And again, I was just blessed to be, I think, maybe the only person, maybe one of only 2 or 3 people ever in the history of the business to go from being a part-time ring announcer, full-time timekeeper, to co-host and color commentator of the TV show.
That is so cool. And there is such raw emotion, and there was real heat in ECW. Was that shocking to you to take on when you became that heel? Because some of the reactions at a lot of the ECW events, I mean, it was real. So how was that for you to take?
I knew to expect it in so much as anybody could ever know it from being a fan of the TV product or somebody who had gone to the shows and bought a ticket as a fan. From that perspective, it wasn't foreign to me. It was just, but to be in the midst of some of those Dudley intros, where you're in the middle of either a potential riot or a full-blown incident, and where you're relying on these guys, the Dudleys, and you're relying on Atlas to, in a sense, protect your life from at any moment. There could have been 3 fans coming, each from a different side of the ring. 1 or 2 with a weapon, and who knows what could have happened. But but for the grace of God went us, and thanks to Atlas, and thanks to the Dudleys themselves being roughhousers. And when Big Dick Dudley was still around, God bless his soul, he was a real, legit tough guy. He wouldn't avoid getting into a scrap, and we did it.
Did that ever happen? I'm curious, with you in the ring, a fan actually rushing you guys?
Yeah, we had there were times where we had some fires that needed to be put out. There were times that people were, and Bubba would antagonize people, and the goal was to try to get them to cross that line and breach that barricade and turn it into something, because we were fully confident that we'd be able to take care of ourselves. And there were times. There were some very hairy, dicey times. It
must have been one hell of a time. And Professor, so can we go over to you now? Can you tell me about the experience you have on commentary so far and some of those responsibilities that you take on when you're commentating a show?
I usually, again, I'm kind of the straight play-by-play, but I've been blessed to have a lot of opportunities. When I started working at Go Wrestle, it was a small operation, and I eventually got moved into the spot to do commentary as well, and we did it in post. So I had a chance to ring announce and then go do commentary. And we had a couple different combinations of guys, but one of the guys I hit it off with is my partner at a lot of different spots. He goes by the name of Sticks, and Sticks has like a 10-year radio broadcasting career. He's a big fan of yours, Joel. He told me to make sure I get that in there somewhere. So there it is. But he is a great color commentator, and he's a lot of fun, and he's a strip club DJ by trade, so he kind of brings an edgy, like these days that's what he's doing, and that's
now I'm a fan of his because I love
he'll like if you're ever in Daytona, he'll hook you up
to the main stage. Love that stuff.
I'll be sure to let him know. He'll be watching this. So
awesome. Yeah.
But we play off each other really well, and it's one of those things, like, I think, and Joel, you could probably speak to this too, a lot of people think that it's easy, and I listen to a lot of commentary, especially on the indies, and just kind of see what people are doing, and it's a difficult job, and even though it's a speaking role, and so is ring announcing, the skill sets are truly unique and very remarkably different from each other. I mean, with ring announcing, for the most part, your spiel is kind of planned out. Like all right, hey, here's so-and-so, here's where they're from, here's their weight, here are their nicknames, boom, 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 here's what championship we're wrestling for, kind of move it right along. Commentary is on the fly. You are reacting to what's developing in front of you, and your job is also to engage and kind of provide the soundtrack for the story that's being told in the ring. So play-by-play is kind of providing that more hit-by-hit soundtrack, and color is more, hey, let's throw in a little bit of extra background, like where are these guys from? I'm kind of the what and the why, and this is the where and the how, like how this works. So that's color versus play-by-play. So play-by-play is kind of where and having the more straight approach and a more sophisticated vocabulary that the professor does, it works well with whoever I play off of, because they're like, what are you saying? And we just can help kind of develop the story that's going on in the ring.
I'm curious, because the more you mention it, the more curious I get. What did you teach as a professor?
So as a professor, my master's is in kinesiology, which is a fancy term for movement science, which I really was a psych major before that. I was in sports psych, but I taught kind of everything under that umbrella. I've taught some basic physiology. I taught group exercise training classes. I taught sports psychology, sports business management, sports marketing, which is where I did a lot of stuff and actually worked a lot of wrestling into my classes, and injury management too. So even as a teacher, I would bring in wrestlers as a great example of very unique athletes, because there's no off season. There's not as, even though there's training, it's not like the NFL, and like you go to high school and you've got athletic trainers and people kind of teaching you about your bodies and how to use them and how to recover. So I was actually doing that as a professor, but these days I'm actually a history teacher. So I've had a lot of chances to teach lots of crazy stuff.
Joel, can I get your opinion on some of the stuff when it comes to what the professor said about commentary? You've commentated some huge events in your career. What has that been like for you?
It's always fun. And yeah, it's definitely a storytelling experience. And definitely, at whatever turn that you're asked, you need to let it be known to the casual fan why what happened means something. Everything has to mean something. The same way, if you're reading a book, even the slowest paragraph that's just setting up to the next paragraph, it's there for a reason. The story wouldn't be the same if it wasn't there. So everything that you're seeing means, and even if you wind up having a cover for something that shouldn't have happened and work into the story why it quote unquote should have happened, there's that opportunity as well. So you always need to make sure that every moment is important, because that's what helps psychologically along the way ingrain into people's minds that the next time they need to not be watching it for free on TV. They need to buy a ticket, because you never know what could happen, because every moment is pivotal.
Right. We always hear nowadays about, in WWE, about the commentators, they always have somebody in their ear telling them exactly what to say, how to do it. Did you have a lot of that in ECW?
None of that. In post-production, me and Joey would be at the studio and Paul would be there. And if he was awake, because he had such a schedule that he wasn't always, but if Paul was awake, there were times where we would get direction. Oh, say what you just said, but say it this way. or we're actually angling towards something else. So I like what you said, all else being equal, but maybe don't say it for this right now. We would get little bits of that, but nothing like the experience of, you're either live or live to tape, and you have somebody in your ear kind of telling you exactly what to say, and you're just saying it in your own voice. We didn't have any of that.
So it was really organic. I mean, some of the moments at ECW really didn't need someone telling you how to react to that, right? I mean, some of them were crazy. How was it working alongside Joey Styles? Did you learn a lot?
Yeah, he was great. He was a genius at it. He was a prodigy at it, and he knew exactly what his role was, and he knew he was meant to be the order amongst disorder, and he was, he was amazing, irreplaceable, invaluable, and getting to work with him, making my first foray as a color commentator, being with somebody like him, as opposed to, being with somebody who kind of wasn't as refined, just basically made my life easier. He always knew how to play off of me. He was always shocked when what I said should have shocked him. And he was always, horrified when what I said was too heelish. And it was just an amazing dynamic, I thought.
Yeah, a dynamic that always makes me laugh whenever I watch any old ECW. You guys were great. Professor, something specific for you. I know that you did a TED-style talk on wrestling, something like that. Can you speak about that a bit? I found that really interesting.
I did. There was that was something else I wanted to do. Again, it goes back to that whole, hey, what other skills do you have that you can kind of put out there that makes you more marketable? And there was an opportunity coming up for an event that was called Elevate Daytona, and it was a 5-minute TED-style talk. I mean, it's not from TED, but it was a TED-style talk. Yeah. Hard 5 minutes, so you had to be exactly within that window, and you had to have 20 PowerPoint slides that would be automatically shifting every 20 seconds, whatever the math is. Off the top of my head, I don't remember, behind you. And it was a tight thing, and I was like, all right, I want to do this, and I want to do something with professional wrestling. So what my concept was I wanted to put something together where I always hated, and maybe Jonah, you too probably could speak to this. Do you get mad when you tell people that you like wrestling and they just immediately dump all over it, and they're like, oh, yes. Oh, it's fake, it's this, it's insulting.
My whole life, yeah.
Yeah, I think all of us could say that. And I was a college teacher, and I was like, I love this, and people are like, oh, that's stupid, and I'm like, really? Because I'm not. Clearly, I've done something where I'm not stupid. Like, I know what this is. In fact, I could tell you all the reasons it's great. And I was like, you know what? More people need to hear why it's great. And I might be a credible voice to kind of lend some credence as to why this art form matters, and how and why does it resonate with people. Like, okay, you like UFC because they beat the snot out of each other. Why do so many people like wrestling? So that was kind of my mission in a way, as well as providing a message for the audience there. So I broke down, and I know not everybody liked this concept because it does pull the curtain back a little. I broke down the structure of a traditional professional wrestling match and used it as an allegory for life. I talked about, the shine and the heat and the comeback and the falsies and the finish, and how, like, your life is like a professional wrestling match. Why does, wrestling matters and resonates with people? Because it tells a story that just like your life tells a story. And I went with a lot of comparisons, and I used nothing but photos from one of a tremendous professional wrestling photographer. In fact, he does all the promo shots for AEW now, Speedy. I used all, because he's got amazing pictures, so I used that as my backdrop. I came out dressed like a ring announcer. I did an intro at the beginning. I did an Undertaker intro live, and then went right into this speech. And no wrestling fans in the house at all. And people watched it and loved it. And then the video went online, and it got a couple thousand hits on my Facebook page. So some people said I didn't like, that you maybe pulled the curtain back a little too much, but I also felt like I still protected certain things. And for a non-wrestling audience, I don't think you're ruining anything because they're already critical. Yeah. I was trying to show why you can like this. You're not an idiot if you like this. And because, like, a lot of people kind of put it down to say, and I've always taken issue with that. So that was my mission, and I like to think I accomplished it.
Absolutely. I have to send me the full thing of it. It sounds really interesting as a fan. Joel, Can you tell me about developing the quintessential stud muffin persona? I want to hear what went into it and how it continued to evolve throughout your run with ECW.
Yeah, it was also a work in progress. It was
Yeah.
also just the kind of thing that evolved over time. I went from wearing the ECW colors of white, black, and red, with my black jacket, my white shirt, and my red bow tie. I went from that to there was a show in, I think, the summer of '96 at Body Slams Arena in Reading, which was essentially a silo and the kind of building where I don't know if there was any real kind of heat or air. It was the kind of thing where if it's hot outside, it's going to be hotter in the building, cold outside, colder in the building. And it was summertime,
Right.
and it felt like it was about 123 degrees. And I went up to Todd Gordon, and I sold him on, I wasn't as heavy yet, but I sold him on kind of Chris Farley doing the Chippendales act with Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
Because I don't, even though I wasn't heavy, I certainly didn't have the body that wrestlers had. So I said, what if, and it was me mixing business with pleasure because I just wanted to shed a layer because of how hot it was. I said, what if today I go out there with no shirt and it's just the jacket and the bow tie? And he was like, I love it. Give it a try. So that's where the shirt got lost. And then when I took Total Elimination from the Eliminators at our first pay-per-view in April of '97, I wound up in a neck brace from there. And that's where the neck brace comes in, of course, under the bow tie, because you still got to be classy, even if you're hurt. You got to play hard. So, the Quintessential Stud Muffin nickname was straight from Paul, who gave it to me as an homage to the universal heartthrob Austin Idol, who he had managed when he was in his early 20s in Alabama, Memphis and Continental and stuff like that. So it was week by week. It was, sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives.
And the limericks, the innuendos that, I mean, at times, they were hilarious all the time, but they were so sometimes pretty complex. And I would imagine that they were hard to memorize. Or how did you come up with that? Can you talk about your process for those?
The first one was probably just me. And I knew I could slip it in real quick because it was pretty short. I remember when I was like 9 years old, I had a book of like truly tasteless jokes. And it was like, how is a dick like a Rubik's Cube? The more you play with it, the harder it gets. And 9-year-old me remembered saying to himself, I'm going to put this to good use one day. And so when I was doing these intros for me and the Dudleys and stuff like that, I remembered that joke. And I was like, wouldn't it be funny if something I read as a child in a paperback joke book, if I could just work that into the intro? And I did.
Yeah.
And yeah, from there, gosh, they grew into like these 16-line or 32-line, stanzas that sometimes did need to get written and conceived half an hour before go time and needed to be memorized. And it wasn't a case of, can I do it or not? It was, this needs to get done, so this is going to get done.
And this may not be a connection that has ever been made. You tell me. We had Lanny Poffo, the genius, on here, and he recited some great limericks for us, none of which exactly compared to, yours, a little different style. But was there ever any inspiration from the genius?
Comparing our stuff is kind of like comparing chalk and porn, yeah. But I'm not sure he was familiar with my work, and I met him a few years ago, and I gave him a sample. I think I gave him my one about being a pussy-licking demon with vanilla-flavored demon. And it made him blush a bit, and that was good. That was my ego boost for the day.
Right.
He was definitely the forefather and laid the groundwork for the pre-match poem. But to be truthful, when it comes to like a sort of a hip hop or rap or poetry, it even goes back to kind of Muhammad Ali and him and Blassie were tight. So
Mhm.
you've got, going back to the 60s, especially the 70s, you've got guys like superstar Billy Graham and Dusty Rhodes who are doing it. So it's kind of it's an art form that even probably goes back before the Leaping Lanny Poffo gimmick, and it's
Mhm.
probably something that you're looking at that's been going on in wrestling for a solid 50 years or more.
Yeah, and you put everyone puts their own spin on it, but you definitely made it very memorable. And Professor, so I'd like to hand it off to you now. We're coming down. So I want to know, what can we expect to see from the Professor, the young Professor, as we move forward in your career?
Hopefully a lot more. I am thinking that this year is going to be, in terms of the number of shows that I do, is going to be a little bit less, but I feel like the quality of the work that I'm doing now and the promotions that I am routine at has improved significantly, as well as my ability to earn from it. So I'm okay with that trade-off. I kind of treated the first 3 years, as like, all right, this is your trial period. This is where you're kind of figuring things out. But I've managed to land. I've been fortunate enough to kind of been put in a lot of different positions to do a lot, and it's gotten me some recognition that has carried me to some good places. So I'm hoping to see more of it. We're recording with Fighting Evolution Wrestling, which is based out of Miami. That's on YouTube and a few different independent networks. Every Saturday night at 6, I'm with Atlanta Wrestling Entertainment, and they have TV airing on Right Now TV. That's on Monday and Thursday nights, and that's a lot of fun. So it's more exposure, it's more of that. And actually, with the Mania announcement coming last night, I'm already getting there's already some wheels spinning about what's happening in and around that time, because here in Florida, being close, having maybe an opportunity this year that was kind of stolen from all of us last year is something that we all kind of want to capitalize on. So I'm hoping that is the case. It's just, more and more building and building is kind of where, because as much as I like doing this, as much as I have fun doing it, I'm not doing it for fun. I'm pursuing it because I would love to do more in entertainment in whatever shape that takes from this point. And I wanted to say something, because Joel said this earlier.
Feel free.
I have not been in the midst of a full-scale riot, but I have been almost hit by 2 old ladies in 2 separate occasions. Once in trivia, because she was this was before the show started. A woman came up to me and violently was trying to take my microphone out of my hand because she was furious that me and my company provided 2 Facebook hints, because she felt that was blatant cheating and was really, really hot about the whole thing. Old people take their trivia very seriously. So in case anyone didn't know that, they should. And another time was another old lady, and I almost got hit because Tony DeVito was using me as a human shield after he said something about her husband not loving her. We'll kind of put it that way. And she said, well, my husband's dead. And he says, oh, no wonder, I would have killed myself too, or something like that. And he used me as a shield. I thought I was going to get hit. So more of that ECW flair coming through and affecting announcers everywhere.
Absolutely. It's a great way to almost finish us off. Joel, can we hear what's next for your future? What can we see of Joel Gertner?
Yeah, just whatever's clever, just trying to take it day by day, stay busy, and do things that would be meaningful. And did some ring announcing the other day for a project that'll be airing soon. Have an in-store appearance in February in Los Angeles. Yeah, just kind of, and then I've got a podcast, the 69-Minute Eargasm. It's available everywhere that you can find podcasts. I've got another one that currently is monthly. We're about to record our second one with me, the Blue Meanie, and Josh Chernoff. And that one, That Was Extreme. You could find that on Patreon for free, actually ad-free shows, and that'll take you over to Patreon, but it's a free show. So I've got both of those. Thinking about going with an ECW-themed podcast that's been in the works for a while now, called Extreme Championship Wednesday. That one hasn't started off yet. I do have a YouTube channel. Just my name, Joel Gertner, will take you there. It's got over 1,000 subscribers. We do cooking, auctions, unboxing, a lot of cool, random, fun stuff. And that's about it. I do cameos. I sell t-shirts on Pro Wrestling Tees. Just kind of try to stay busy with wrestling and non-wrestling stuff.
and we love to see it. And final question, do you have any advice for Matt, the young professor, as he moves forward in his announcing career?
Got to keep at it. Got to regret what you do and regret what time you put in and what moves you make versus sit back 5-10 years from now after not doing something and not pursuing and regret that you didn't. So it's like that guy where he's scratching at the wall and he's so close to hitting the diamonds and then he turns away. You got to just keep going, keep scratching, keep pushing, because for all of the people who don't get to where they wanted to go, for some of them, they were a whole lot closer than they ever knew that they were. Don't ever be that guy.
I appreciate that, man. And when you were talking earlier about your first, when you sat with Paul Heyman and did your elevator speech, and you said, you've got to ask the question, that really resonated with me, because that's my whole thing. I think one of my biggest strengths more than anything is I'm not afraid to speak up. I'm not afraid to ask questions. And even today, Jonah hit me up 2 nights ago. It was very last minute. And he said, can you do this show on Sunday? It's going to be with Joel Gertner. We'll get 2 announcers together. It would be great. He said 3:00. I was like, oh my God, our tapings are starting at that time. I don't want to say no. This is a great opportunity for me to get a chance to learn from someone who has been in this position. And this spot is going to go to somebody else. I don't want that either. The time doesn't work. I asked the question. He could have told me no, and it could have been someone else sitting here, but I asked, and lo and behold, we were able to put it together. So for both of you to make that happen, thank you. And it's a lesson to everybody. Don't be afraid to ask questions. What's the worst that can happen? You're really no worse off if you get a no than you would have been. And you might get a yes, and who knows where that can take you.
Really well said. And I'm happy we got to make this happen too, because this was fantastic. That finishes us off for this episode. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you, Jonah. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonah. Appreciate it. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Woo! Messy Daddy. Boogie Woogie Man feel good. I tell my people, my brothers and sisters, don't you dare miss online. Rewind, recap, relive. Oh yeah!